Can Republicans keep a majority in the Senate? What does a win look like for Trump during his China visit? And a warning to John Thune. Steve Bannon has it all coming right up. Welcome to the Sean Spicer Show. Let's get into it. All right, guys, good Friday to you. Headed off to the Kennedy Center right now. I think if you want to just show up, you can probably make it down and we'll have some fun with you. Have a talk about Trump 2.0. Excited about that. And a big week, by the way. Steve Bannon's here. I forgot to say that. Oh, yeah. Oh, hello. So Bannon is here. We got a lot to break down with him. I'll talk about that in just a second. And then next week, a really big show coming your way. My buddy Andrew Giuliani is going to come give us an update on his dad, who showed up last night again on his show. Thank God he's doing better, and give us an update on that. But plus, Andrew's leading this whole FIFA effort in the country. What does this mean for us in terms of the impact that DHS funding has had on securing the country? And you see some of these fights about the New Jersey's charging people. It's now like $100 to take the bus. It's insane. We got a late, and then Ron Johnson's going to be here. A big week. So continue to hit that subscribe notification button. Anything you can do when you're watching the show to send a link around to family and friends and say, hey, I'm watching the Sean Spicer Show. You should watch it too. Join in the premiere. Have fun in the chat, whatever you want. But that's how we grow. I appreciate everybody who does that. So anyway, a real big thank you to everybody who's been helping with that as well. We had a big week, though. The president's obviously doing this China trip. A lot of big wins on the Republican side when it came to redistricting, and I'm going to get into that. But I wanted to give a sense of like getting Steve Bannon's take on this is going to be super helpful on a whole host of issues, because I think Steve has had his pulse on the MAGA movement, well before even Trump came to office. As you guys remember, I mean, he became the chief strategist during the campaign and then obviously served with them as well. So getting his sense of like, what are we doing to win? What do we need to worry about? What do our priorities need to be? What is his take on some of these key races? What do we need to do what does a win look like in China? Because, guys, one of the big things, President Xi warned President Trump today about China. Basically, yesterday, rather, keeping days straight here. Said, this is it. This is the whole shooting match, how we deal with Taiwan. And obviously, we know they want Taiwan. So that's a big deal. And I'm just telling you, we've got to think about that. What does all this mean? Because they want to take Taiwan back, but it's not just about Taiwan. It's about the Taiwan Strait. It's about the South China Sea. It's about freedom of navigation. And this is a big deal. So it's not just a little island off the coast of China that we have to worry about. This is a big deal. And this will have everything to do with how we work together going forward. So, and obviously a lot of concern about President Trump by the ruling establishment, elitist foreign policy crowd over what he says on Taiwan. Anyway, I want to bring in Steve. Before I do that, just real quick, a big thank you to the folks at Patriot Mobile for continuing to be great partners of ours. I know Steve is going to probably head down to Texas again. He always broadcasts out of the Patriot Mobile studio. And they are just such a great wireless company. I have the Puck, the hotspot. So when I was traveling, I'd like to bring that because I need strong internet. But why I really love them is not just even the customer service or the plans. They're an activist company. Every time we talk about them, right, they're at the NRA convention, some pro-life convention. They helped on that Sharia law stuff down in Texas. These guys really are out there as doers. They're not just giving money too. They're actively engaged in these causes, pro-life causes, veterans causes. I love that. So if you want to actually get high quality, the highest quality wireless service and help a company do the right thing and support your values, then go to patriotmobile.com/Spicer, use code Spicer, or give them a call at 972-PATRIOT. In either case, you get a free month for free. And it could not be easier. Literally, when you go to patriotmobile.com/Spicer, code Spicer for your deal, your free month, they'll send you an email. It's got a QR code. You take your phone, camera, put it right on there, and boom, they send you this eSIM card. Then they change your service over. Just go to patriotmobile.com/Spicer, code word Spicer. And then when you're done with that, if you are ready to go to bed, which I will be, I've had a long week, you know what I'm going to tell you because I do it all the time and I've got it right here. I've got the brownie batter one. That's the one that I crushed, last week. but I love the cocoa cinnamon one. I got that one sitting right here. I literally have, this is a huge part of my evening routine. Half hour before to bed, I take one scoop, put it in some water. I put it in the microwave for 30 minutes. If I'm traveling and I don't have a microwave, I just drink it straight. It's that good. It's that good. The best part is it puts you right to sleep 30 minutes later. When my head hits the pillow, it's got 5 natural ingredients: reishi, apigenin, L-theanine, magnesium, melatonin. And that's it. It's all natural. That's the beauty of this stuff. And I fall asleep. I wake up. I don't need the alarm anymore. I just wake up and I'm ready to go because I've made Beam Stream Powder part of my nightly routine. You should do it too. They've got a 40% off deal right now. I, honest to God, never know when this is going to end. This is the best deal that Beam has ever given, because I go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code Spicer for that 40% off deal. Shopbeam, BEAM.com/Spicer. Use code Spicer. Without further ado, I want to bring in the host of Bannon's War Room, the former chief strategist in Trump 1.0, Mr. Steve Bannon. Steve, welcome back to the show. First and foremost, a big thank you to you, to the War Room posse, to Real America's Voice. You guys were awesome. Trump 2.0, making the bestseller list. Our mutual friend, Tony Lyons, said to me, Sean, you put President Trump's face on the cover. I don't know that that's going to go over too well with the New York Times. And yet all of the support from you and your team did it. And I think it spoke volumes. They were probably afraid not to put it on.
Look, the support was very simple. The people love the book, I think, because you know President Trump. You really understand the MAGA movement, and you put into print, I think, something we haven't seen before. And I agree. But your audience should understand, if you've got any Trump in the title, the New York Times is not going to count the sales to make the New York Times bestseller list, because once you make the New York Times bestseller list, you then get into other media, it gets picked up. The power of the book, though, is, I think, speaks for itself. What we're hoping for is a second week on the New York Times bestseller list, so we can drive it. And I think, I tell you, Sean, our people are very excited about the event you've got at the Trump Kennedy Center. So I think that will propel us forward. But you just
you. I mean,
you nailed
the thing that I find fascinating, again, thank you, but it's really interesting to see the power of your team, because it wasn't just my book. I think we'll hopefully get a second to get into this, but I don't think people appreciate that, like, the redistricting effort that Brian Kemp has faced in Georgia, that Henry McMaster has faced in South Carolina, is because you guys put your foot on the pedal and said, we're going to hold you accountable. And I think these legislators and these governors heard from you in the grassroots.
We see this started a couple of years ago, because it was when, and because this fight and this war goes back years. You remember you were at the RNC and you had the consent decree, and it kind of handcuffed everybody.
Yeah.
People got into a mentality that, oh, we're bad, we're xenophobic, they accuse us of racism, we can't get outside the box. And for decades, that consent decree really kind of formed a major part of the Republican Party's inability to kind of fight back and push back. And so with Alex DeGrasse, who was a Stefanik's senior strategist back in 21, 22, came to me and said, hey, Hochul's going to try to take a bunch of seats in New York. And what they're trying to do is use this redistricting to basically change the calculus. I had been with Stephen Miller. As you remember, in the first term, we put forward a census plan that would not count illegal aliens. And you were there at the time. We worked it all the way through. The Supreme Court was going to uphold it. It was folks over the Commerce Department said, oh, no. We can't be called racist. We can't do this. And they fought President Trump, and we kind of reversed ourselves and didn't get the census. The fight for the redistricting really started in 22. If we had not, with Alex DeGrasse, gotten to Florida, because they had already gone home, to come back and Ron DeSantis under his leadership do it, 11 seats changed on redistricting in 22. The Democrats took 8. We took 8. The Democrats took 3. If we didn't have that, we probably wouldn't have taken control of the House. Nobody realizes these redistricting wars set the predicate. In the War Room Posse, we have a big audience. Now, some podcasters are bigger, but it doesn't matter. Our audience are the grassroots leaders throughout the country, the activists. And so particularly, they understand, Sean, as you do, the power of these redistricting fights and why local, state, legislatures don't really want to get involved in it, because they make all those deals on a local basis. At the federal level, that's got to deal with itself, and it takes pressure. And that's what you saw this time, because every seat counts on this. And we're still, I think, 6 short of what we should have. But the War Room Posse and the activism, and quite frankly, you coming and being Bomber Command, the most powerful thing Sean, really was your Twitter feed, Caroline Wren's Twitter feed, and Alex DeGrasse. Those Twitter feeds in that crucial week really gave people guidance of what to do. And we know from Texas all the way to the current fights, and there's still some to fight, that these are absolutely essential. And the Supreme Court saying they're unconstitutional just, to me, adds an element that conservatives who want to restore the constitutional order. So this fight's a long way from over. But I want to get back to the book. That's one of the reasons books like yours inspire people. They get to step back and kind of see because you're in the trenches and you're fighting and you're making phone calls or you're sending text messages. Sometimes you lose the big picture of exactly what this is all about. What your book does is delineate why this is so different. And look, you're not going to agree with every policy. We're going to talk a minute about China. As you know, we're some of the biggest China hawks. It doesn't, policy by policy, it's important, but it doesn't matter at the heart of it, the essence of it. This is why the MAGA movement and this Trump revolution is so unique. You lay that out in Trump 2.0 and really, I think, remind people what this fight's all about.
Well, I appreciate that. It's interesting because you talk about this idea of fight. Like we talk about the New York Times bestseller list, getting on that. Talk about what, Alex DeGrasse and Caroline Wren and others did to help get the redistricting fight. I think that part of this, Steve, is that this mentality and I've never thought about it in the way that you just presented it, right? So for the longest time, people have to understand the RNC was under what they call a consent decree. Steve just referred to it, where they had agreed through a bunch of dumb lawyers back like in the 1980s through a New Jersey case that they would not do any election day activities because apparently they had done something bad in like 1902. And so every year, and the Democrats would just ask the court to extend the consent decree and no one would stop it. And so there was this mentality, and this is what I want to get at, is I feel like we're slowly starting to realize, hey, wow, if we get out there and we get excited, we can win, right? And we've now shown it in the redistricting effort and others. But as we head towards the midterm, what's the lesson that you want people to take away?
Here's the lesson. The way I explain it is three elements: structure, content, and process. Structure are the types of things we're doing right now, like on the redistricting, or like you said, in reversing this consent decree and actually having a early voting, but a game day, to have a structure that works, and particularly do everything structurally we can before the elections actually start to put ourselves into the best position for victory. Process is really the grassroots, and grassroots we now know, and you've seen it from Texas. You were actively involved with us in Virginia. You see the power of people come out on a Sunday afternoon. The grassroots process of precinct strategy and people working together, learning the lessons of 16 and 20, manifesting itself in 24, the whole turning point action, all of that. That is process. The thing in the middle that motivates people is content. And this is why the Save America Act is so important. This is why what President Trump, now this new housing act, we had Pulte and these guys on to give people content to fight. That's where Trump 2.0 fits in. You have to have that content to structure, then you have the content, then you have the process. The content's the linchpin because that's the motivational factor. That's where you're telling your troops, this is worth fighting for. Remember in Virginia, Sean, 45 days early voting. If we had not competed so intensely in the 45 days from the grassroots effort with no money behind them, and you actually said, I think you actually put a proposal for $5 million, we can win this thing and don't have to depend upon the Supreme Court of the Commonwealth bailing us out. You see how important that content and motivational part is to make sure the process, the grassroots process works. That is why it's so critical over the next couple of months in leading up to basically after Labor Day. We have to get the content right. This is why China's big. This is why what we do on America 250 is big. This is why, forcing the situation in the Senate. Because right now, Sean, maybe I'm a little against the tide. I think we have a fighting chance, given the structural changes that we've done and others, to actually hold serve in the House. I think the Senate's in real jeopardy. Because why? Because the content is not right. People feel like the Senate has abandoned them. Thune and those guys are going to fare thee well and Save America and so many other things. And so this is why I tell the troops, let's just get all three aligned, and the grassroots because we know they've copied our plan. This is what Mondami's done. This is what the Working Family Party has done, the DSA. They've basically taken the Trump grassroots model of voter engagement. What your proposal was in Virginia was stupid ads on cable TV are irrelevant. You're just playing to an audience that's either already going to vote or decided they're not. What you have to do is voter engagement at the one-on-one level. Only grassroots participation can give you that.
100%. It's interesting, though. I'm with you on the House. I actually think the problem, just to give you my 2 cents, in the same way that I put out the redistricting on Twitter, I put the math out. Right now, the consensus among all of the prognosticators, if you actually count the seats, we have about 212 seats. That means we're about 6 short of maintaining the majority. I get us between 16 and 18 toss-up seats. That means that you actually have to take like 35 to 40%, and we get the majority. No one wants to do the math, Steve, on the House. That's funny. They go, history suggests. History doesn't mean crap. I mean, I literally go.
When I see these pundits on there, it's ridiculous. What's amazing to me is the media don't, because it's a collection of individual races. When you said that you're at 212, and for the audience to understand this is why these kind of what I call the 5 or 6 that are still hanging out there, every one is monumentally important.
100%.
If you pick up one, if we get to 214 prior to Labor Day, 215, that is such a, I mean, then you just ton in the resources into these races. But I think you're 100% correct. That's why I think we have a fighting, given all the happy talk and black pilling and pundits saying, oh, they'll normally win 30 or 40 seats. They don't understand how modern politics and the restructuring of modern politics is taking place, really started by the Democrats, but I'm really proud of the Republicans and really the Trump movement in fighting back. So no, I agree with you. I think we're within hollering distance. In the Senate, I haven't had a chance to ask you. I think the Senate, we're in real trouble.
Okay, well I can walk you through each of those seats because we have a 3-seat majority, 7 seats in play. I actually think it depends who the Democrats nominate in Michigan. If it's El Said, Mike Rogers wins every day of the week.
I think the one glimmer of hope, I was telling Katie this the other day, is I think Michigan. I think Rogers, if they have a perfect candidate for what they're doing now, the NPR crowd, right? And I think Michelle Morrow is her name. They have that. But if the radical Muslim wins, I think Rogers is the next senator.
No, that's what I'm saying. But again, the same principle. Okay, so look, 3-seat majority in the Senate, 7 races at stake if you don't count Texas and Iowa, which I don't. And so again, do the math. All Democrats need to run the table to have a shot. That's why I think. But this is the interesting thing. This is what you touched on this a second ago. You said Senate Republican leader John Thune of South Dakota for failing to pass the SAVE Act, that Trump's political base is prepared to punish him, punish John Thune. What does that mean?
I think with Thune, I strongly think unless they take the 27 votes and change him out as leader, it's going to be they could come very close to running the table. It's because they just had this thing that's going around yesterday evening and this morning on Thune's doing a fundraiser, sent a fundraiser letter out, basically quoting the Save America Act. It's terrible. It's illegal aliens voting. It's all these guys in the rolls. They do this for apportionment. And he's raising money. He's raising it for small dollar donors on this. Exactly why people want him to push the Save America Act. I think the grassroots, I think they look at the congressional seats as units that they can control and get involved in and move the needle. These states are at kind of such a scale, unless you're really motivated, right? I think it could, we've just run out of gas. And I think is
it John Thune's fault though? Or is John Thune reporting the number, right? Is he saying, here's the number? Because that's what he says. He said it the other day, we don't have the votes and da-da-da. Is our blame, should our ire be focused on John Thune, or which is fair for lack of, how he's leading this effort, or should it be on Mitch McConnell and the Republicans that won't vote for it? Or both.
But it's definitely, but Thune is kind of a holdover of the McConnell of the way the McConnell ran the Senate. Here's what I think is the biggest problem. And I say this with all due respect to the president, but I think just the reality is the United States Senate has been treating President Trump as a lame duck for a while. And I think it's unacceptable. And I hold John Thune accountable for that. Given all the Mitch McConnell stuff, is that number one, people don't realize this. In the now 5.5 years that President Trump has been president of the United States, the 4 year, the first term, and the 1.5 years, the Senate's never been on recess one day because McConnell was said, I'm never going to go on official recess because I don't want to give Trump the option for for recess appointments. They really haven't moved any of the legislation that he's asked for is so vital right now, particularly the Save America Act. There was a performative effort. We know because we covered it every night. And I would tell people, I said, this is not getting traction. And you had Schmidt and you had Mike Lee, you had some of these populist heroes in the Senate, but it wasn't going. So I think my belief is you got to make a big change. You don't have, Thune keeps saying he doesn't have 51 votes. Well, let's say that's true. As a leader, to me, he's failed the president and failed the party and failed the country. I definitely believe you can get 27 votes. And with 27 votes, you could change leadership and get someone else in there that would essentially get Save America done.
Who would that be? If you got to pick who the next leader would be?
This is how bad I think it is in the Senate. I don't know. I mean, I think the leaders, the new generation of leaders of the Schmitts and the Banks and the Hawleys, you see kind of these MAGA populist nationalists coming up. Obviously, they would be too junior for leadership. I don't know. You try Rick Scott or anybody's got to be better than Thune. Anybody could tell the president he could deliver between now and the end of the year. Or I do think you put in jeopardy, because the theory of the case in the Senate is they feel they've raised so much money, right? And they got to run the tables that they could still hold. But I tell you, I think Ohio, I'm also concerned about Iowa, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I'm concerned about Alaska, Michigan. I'm not Michigan, Alaska, Maine. And we're dodging a bullet in Michigan because they have a candidate who's obviously terrible, but for them, she's marketable. They have this radical Muslim that's going to be very, very difficult. And I think Katie and the team over there are running a great campaign. So I think Rogers will be the next senator if they nominate.
You didn't mention Texas. Do you have any concerns?
Oh, a huge concern. We're shifting the show down there next week. And one of the reasons we went down and did the reason we went and really started this kind of Sharia law proposition, I was very concerned at the end of last year that we had lost all the momentum and mojo of the grassroots movement. People couldn't get a hook to grab on. And I said, hey, in Texas is everything. In the Paxton situation, and remember, I was a guy that went to Ken and said, look, I would love for you to be Attorney General of the United States or stay as Attorney General. The Senate, I'm just not a big fan of the Senate. And he wanted to do it. So I said, and once you do it, we got to win because Cornyn's so bad. We did the whole Sharia law thing. Is one of the things is just to get the muscle memory going of how you organize with no money. I mean, the proposal you put in the Commonwealth of Virginia, people should understand, you went in and said, hey, we don't have unlimited money and we're not going to spend it on, and we're certainly not going to spend it on commercials, on TV commercials, right? So we're going to have the grassroots. That's what was in Texas. I'm very concerned. I believe that, I've seen polling that Paxton may be up 5, 6, 7, 8 points. However, Cornyn just again started another massive bombing campaign on ads that are so negative. They don't say anything of policy. It's just that, Ken Paxton's a creep. He's a weirdo, and you can't vote for him for the U.S. Senate. I believe that if Cornyn wins, we have a much harder time beating Tallarico, because I do think there is some portion of the grassroots movement that said this thing has been so vicious. It's been the personal attacks and the politics of personal destruction on Ken Paxton been so awful. I think a certain part of the MAGA base, of President Trump's base, will not come out for any reason and vote for Cornyn, given what he's done against Ken Paxton. That's why I think Ken Paxton, and actually, I believe Tallarico is actually so weird and so outside the mainstream when you really get down to it. I'm not that concerned about Texas right now. I'm much more concerned about I'm very concerned about Maine. I'm concerned about North Carolina. I think Whatley.
Yes, I agree with you.
Cooper is the prototypical person the Democrats want to put up. A milquetoast white guy, right? Older, that looks like a country gentleman and speaks with a soft voice. But in back of him is all these radicals, right? But you get that, and that's why I think Whatley's got a real fight in North Carolina. I think we got a fight in Maine. I think we're going to have a fight in Ohio. I think Sherrod Brown is very competitive. Yes. He's old school populist. The current guy, and I just think Vivek at the head of the ticket as governor is not going to be strong. I think we got a real fight in that. Hell, they've just raised $10 or $12 million for Alaska. Dan Sullivan, the Marine, a really strong guy. They're coming for Alaska. So we in the U.S. Senate, We got a big fight on our hands. And if that, let's go back to structure and process, unless we get the content part right there, and we don't have it. If you you go around the country, Sean, and talk to people about this, well, like, look in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I don't even think we're putting up a candidate, but nobody talks about that race at all, right? It's really been forgotten. And so that's the problem we've got, is that people, the grassroots, don't feel they've got a vested interest in fight in the U.S. Senate.
All right, before I got to get your take on China, because that's huge, and I just want to hear your perspective. One last race I want you to weigh in on. The president kind of teased it this week. He said, who do you like more, Marco or JD? And then he was going back and forth. He said it would be a dream ticket. First of all, do you have a dog in this fight? And second of all, do you think that this JD Rubio ticket would be the quote-unquote dream ticket?
I tell people this all the time. I think we're making a huge mistake about thinking about anything that's past the 2026 midterm, because things are changing so rapidly. Things are changing. I mean, huge things with AI, with China, with what's going on with the economy. And look, Bessent and Secretary Bessent, which is was a contributor to War Room for years, that we pushed hard to be Secretary of Treasury. He and President Trump had a plan, and it was starting to work. You could see that. You saw that print on the wholesale inflation the other day. Remember, Santillan, everybody said it's the highest print on wholesale inflation since March of 22. That ought to send a cold shiver down everybody's spine, because that was the beginning of when it took off under Biden because of that massive federal spending. My point, every day right now is a fight and a challenge. We have to focus on what is that. And all this, people defer to talk about a horse race like that when they don't want to focus and do the hard work of the now president. We have no earthly idea what's going to be taking place. I will say this, for people in this administration, and particularly for Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio, you better get it right on Iran, because the Iranians know that they're going to drag this thing through in that inflation print the other day. And we had an auction of 30-year treasuries that didn't go great. It was very little. I shouldn't say little demand. It was light demand, and the interest rates went over 5%. People have to understand we got to get this right, and we have to get it right now. That's going to take a monumental work, and let 28 deal with itself. We got plenty of time. Right now, everything's got to converge in November of this year. If we lose the House, even by one seat, and this is why what you have done in redistricting has been so monumental, being kind of bomber command in your Twitter feed. If we lose it by one seat, they're gonna run it like they got a 50 seat. The Democrats are basically a mafia, right? They run it like a criminal enterprise. If they take the House by one seat, you're going to have Hakeem Jeffries in your life. This is why I tell people. That's why these seats right now, the 6 we haven't done, and I just saw McMaster's are going to call them back, are so huge right now that
I've got a whole breakdown coming on this. I'll walk through every state. I need to get your take, though, on China. The President Xi, Chairman Xi, as I like to say, warned President Trump about Taiwan. You mentioned Iran. There's a lot of concerns about this relationship and what defines a win going forward. What is the takeaway that you need to see out of this meeting in China?
Let's be blunt. If when they got down and started the meeting in the Great Hall after the pass and review and the review of the troops and the little kids jumping up and down, the Harvard class of 2040 jumping up and down greeting the president, and or the new Red Guard, whatever you want to call them. He started by referring to the Thucydides trap. In his opening comments, he talked about the Thucydides trap. Now, for your audience maybe not familiar with that, that is a construct from Henry Kissinger and Graham Allison, really about kind of the Cold War, but they took it up to date to the conflict with China, or our relationship with China that goes back to the Peloponnesian War, that says you have a declining hegemon, you have a declining power and a rising power. And if they don't come to some accommodation, in the 16 times in world history this has happened, 12 times they have not come to accommodation, and they've had a global catastrophic conflict. In the 4 times you've had kind of peace and prosperity. So in the opening 5 minutes of his opening remarks to Trump sitting in the Great Hall, he says the Thucydides trap, which basically, yo, bro, you're the head of the declining hegemon. I'm the rising power. and Taiwan's everything. He says, he says, our relationship about Taiwan and what happens in the future is either going to lead us to win-win and prosperity of essentially you fold, or if you stop our reunification, it's going to lead to conflict, and basically implied a conflict we're going to win. You could not, given how polite they are in diplomatic circles, because they don't want to seem like they're talking down to people, they couldn't be more blunt. And Rubio came out afterwards, Secretary Rubio, and said it really wasn't a big deal on the first day of talks. They didn't really talk about arms sales, all that. Well, in the second day, this is going to be central. They have laid out that the central element about this relationships stands with their reunification, what they say is a wayward province. And we say, particularly the anti-CCP crowd, of which I'm proud to be one of the leaders of, says is an independent country. And so people, you can take Elon Musk and you can go kowtow with all the lords of easy money, the Larry Finks and the Steve Schwartzman. You can take over Tim Apple, and you can take Jensen Huang and Elon Musk, and you can kowtow all you want, and you can be a supplicant all you want. But these guys are about power politics. And right now, the Strait of Taiwan and Taiwan with those chip facilities and chip plants are the number one priority of the Chinese Communist Party. And people are just going to have to realize that we're going to have to address it.
Okay. Well, again, thank you. This is hugely informative, great perspective. Thanks again for all your help.
I want to thank you for doing the book. I want to thank you for working with Tony to do the free thing, the free event for the War Room Posse and your audience to get to go to the Trump Kennedy Center before it closes for 2 years and have really essentially a major event, which is all free, is extraordinary. The book is great. Let's just continue to push it and keep it in the New York Times so other people are forced to deal with President Trump's picture, this beautiful photo in the top 15 books in the nation, sir.
Will do. Hey, again, thanks for your help and your friendship. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you,
care.
Captain.
All right, what a way to wrap the week with that Steve Bannon, huh? I mean, he killed it on all these issues. It was funny. I don't know if you caught the President Trump was talking after his initial meeting with Xi about how he thought the children were so happy and they were hopping up and down. If you haven't seen the video, I'm sure you can find it online. But these kids just hopping up and down as President Trump and President Xi went into the Great Hall. And Bannon's comment about that being the Harvard class or whatever, right? Because it's true. These kids are all going to get sent over. We'll educate them. Then they'll probably fly back over and have a baby, get U.S. citizenship. I mean, it's insane. But that's where we are right now as a country. Like, that's how crazy this stuff is. And we all know it. They'll buy up our farmland right next to military bases. We're allowing all this to happen. And that's what kills me so much when it comes to China. We're literally watching this thing happen. And I don't know what it's going to take. I know President Trump wants to get this relationship. We're not ready. But this is the other part. We can't just say that to China. We need to be doing the spade work here at home. Like, why are we not bringing back that manufacturing base when it comes to pharma and PPE and all the critical stuff? Why aren't we really expediting our look at critical minerals? The idea that these guys can hold us hostage in China, this is horrible. It's a bad idea. Like, they know how to play the game. We've got to become less reliant on them. And I think this is important. And Steve mentioned Taiwan. This is the game, folks. This is absolutely the game. They will control so much if they control China. It's not about the landmass. It's about everything that's around it and the freedom of navigation that ships can get in and out and around. Unbelievable. But I wasn't even expecting the focus that we had on the Senate there, walking through those races, what's at stake. Look, I'm a little bit more bullish than he is on the Senate. But this is a big deal because the House, obviously, we need for the policy piece, right? But we need the Senate for the nominations. If you lose the Senate, then there's no more assistant secretaries or ambassadors or whatever. The Democrats will have a say in everything, and we'll have to pay for whatever it is. There'll be deals galore. So getting these Senate races over the finish line, and he's right. Look, you got to keep an eye on Alaska. Mary Peltola is running. She was elected to the House statewide. So she's got some names. She's raising some money. The Maine race is always going to be concerning. But my gosh, if we can't win against a guy who had a Nazi tattoo and said that women deserve their sexual assault, then I don't know what what our problem is. But anyway, that was a great thing. And Steve's right, though. We've got to stay focused on what's at stake this November, not worry. And JD Vance gave a great comment about The Apprentice and all this stuff.
Us who are bringing this up, a couple days ago, Trump made this statement to people in the Rose Garden. Why do you think he does that? Do you think it's a little bit of toying with you both over your succession? Why do you think he brings that up? Just number one.
Well, I just don't think it sounds like the President of the United States to have a televised competition for who would succeed him as his apprentice. I just think that's not at all what you would expect the President to do. But no, I think the President, he's always been fascinated by politics. If you talk to him, he was fascinated by politics 30 years before he ever ran for office. So I think it's natural for him to, joke around with us a little bit, to play around with the idea. But I can tell you the President is as focused as any of us on making sure we do as good of a job now for the American people.
But let me show you what he said when he talked about Marco Rubio. Take a look.
Can you tell me a little bit about, the president has been toying this idea of a joint ticket between you and Rubio. What do you think about that?
Oh, man. What I think is there are a few topics that I want to talk about less than what office I'm going to run for years down the road when I'm having a good time and trying to do good work in the job that the American people already elected me to do. Look, as I've answered this question probably in any number of ways. I love Marco. I think he's a great Secretary of State. He's become a very, very dear friend. But I think both of us are very much focused on accomplishing the American people's business right now. If I was the American people, there are few things that I would hate more than a person who's barely been in one office for a year and a half, who's angling for a job 2.5 years down the road. Let's do a good job now. We just got to keep at it.
It's funny. He then went on a joke with another reporter asked him about teaming up with Marco, this dream ticket, which I actually think would be pretty good. I asked Steve the same question, and he said, it's not like there's some apprentice thing here. It was funny. I think everybody got a kick out of it. Anyway, I think what was interesting, though, is the way that Vance answered the question is exactly what Steve Bannon was talking about, which was stay focused. Don't worry about 2028, because if we don't get all this right, then that's a completely different story. And I do think once in a while, we have to remember this, that's the important thing. Stay focused on the real prize. Anyway, I say all that because the other thing that he talked about was John Thune and who could replace him if he doesn't stay focused on these issues like Save America. And look, I think that there is a little bit of both. Like, we should be leading more on this. We should be messaging more effectively on this. I think it's a bit of a cop-out to be like, oh, we put it up for a vote. It's so what? Then fight for it. Fight for it. Call these other guys out. If you can't be for photo ID and proof of citizenship, then what are we doing? We know what their side's going to do. They want open borders. They want to pack the court. They want to register all these folks and give them citizenship. They say it. This isn't like some notional idea of what's happening. That's it. Right. And so we need to make a bigger deal out of this. And John Thune sort of threw his hands up. I mean, look, again, part of the reason I asked Steve the question I did is Thune's, to some degree, yes, he could be leading more. They could be doing more messaging. It's not just about going through the motions. What else can you be doing? But we need to go after the folks that didn't vote yes. Thune can't force them. At some point, we need to put the heat on them. Just the same way we're doing this in the redistricting efforts. A lot of these guys didn't want to do it. They were like, oh, we don't have time, special session, da-da-da. And it was because of the pressure that was put on them. But here was Thune when he talked about, both the filibuster and the Save America Act.
Where do you stand on that currently? Would you reconsider getting rid of the filibuster to get it across the finish line?
We don't have the votes to get rid of the filibuster. We called it up on the floor March, I think, 17th. We were on it for several weeks and had a very spirited debate. In fact, I think with the exception of maybe a couple of Republican senators, made more speeches on the floor in support of the SAVE Act than almost any other senator. And we had some votes on it. And we voted on the narrow issue, which is the most popular one, of voter ID. And we put the Democrats on the record. Every single Democrat voted against it. We added, and one of the other elements, also popular, was whether or not biological boys ought to play in girls' sports. We had that vote, and every Democrat voted against that as well. So we've taken what I think are probably the two issues, in my view, that have the broadest public support and put the Democrats on record, and every single one of them voted against it. So we'll look for opportunities to get other votes. There was a vote on the budget resolution, an amendment that Senator Kennedy offered that didn't even get 50 votes on the floor. And so we're continuing to look for opportunities to advance that legislation. Obviously, it's something that I support. I think we all support, and we think it's something that the American people are broadly supportive as well.
All right. Again, it's like we tried. Sorry. Can't do much more. Anyway, as I said, next week we've got a big show. Ron Johnson will be here. Scott Rasmussen, the storied pollster, he's going to join us on Monday. Andrew Giuliani is going to give us an update on his dad, plus what they're doing to get the FIFA soccer tournament ready, secure, all that kind of stuff. But before we end the week, I do want to give you guys a redistricting update, because Steve mentioned, what's happening. And it's been a frustration of mine that the media loves to say, oh, Republicans, the headwinds headwinds in history don't vote. You actually have to go seat by seat. And as I was telling Steve, and you guys heard me say this, that go do the math. There's about 212 seats. You take 218 to get the majority, about 212 are pretty solid Republican. So you need 6. And everyone we pick up, and this is why, again, I want to give you this redistricting update, because no one else is talking about the numbers. No one else is doing this. I can't find anyone who's doing this. They're covering the redistricting. And as Steve said, think about this. You pick up 2 more seats. Suddenly you're at 213, 214, and you need 3 or 4 seats. And now you're back in the majority. So it matters, because everyone loves to just use a talking point because they heard it from some other random pundit on cable that doesn't know what the heck they're talking about, that's never been in a congressional race. So let's do this real quick. Democrats are really upset about what's going on. So in Maryland, they've tried to push through a map. They only have one Republican, Andy Harris, in Maryland. And they're trying to get rid of that. But the state Senate president says, hey, the court's not going to uphold this, and I'm not going to do it. And I think he's probably right. It's not that he's not doing it because he doesn't want to. I don't know that either way. He's doing it because they tried to before, and the court said they overreached. But here's the difference in Maryland. If they get caught overreaching, the court could easily redraw all the maps, and then they'd go from potentially just one Republican seat to 1 or 2. So I'm just telling you, it's not for nothing that they're doing that. And by the way, this is not we already talked about Florida completely redrawing its seats, +4 for the Republicans there. But check out what's happening in this new Florida 20th congressional district. Okay, currently no one technically represents that. There's about 5 people in here right now to be the nominee, and it's solidly blue. So whoever wins that will be the Republican nominee, because they did get a handful of seats after this. One of the 5 is Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She represents the Boca Raton area right now. She's a very prominent Jewish advocate for the people that she represents. Very outspoken on this, but it's now got a very heavy population of blacks in that district, which will be Democrats. So again, who wins it? And now they've got this intra-party fight going on. In fact, the district technically was represented by Sheila Schifferfelis McCormick. Remember, that's the woman who resigned for stealing COVID funds. She actually literally resigned from Congress because of COVID funds. And she's running again for her old seat. She's one of a handful of black Democrats that's running. But this is the kicker, and the reason I'm telling you this story. The Democrats think that it's theirs, and Debbie Wasserman Schultz should drop out of the race because she's white. So they actually think this is their seat. It's funny watching the Dems go through all this stuff now. It's hysterical. And they are now going through this intra-party thing where they've never had to worry it before, because you carve out the district, you knew it was theirs, and the Democrats got to check a box. And now they actually can't do that anymore. So I'm just telling you, it's been fun watching the aftermath of the redistricting. We saw this in Virginia. They've been trying to file with the Supreme Court. They didn't even send it to the right court. They spelled attorney wrong. They spelled Virginia wrong. They spelled senator wrong. Anyway, but the fallout since Virginia has been them just massive disarray. All right, let me give you a quick rundown of the other states just to give you a sense of where we are as we head into the weekend. In South Carolina, there was a little bit of concern, right? Because this is the Jim Clyburn district outside of Charleston, South Carolina. That's a black district. Jim Clyburn, a mountain, like a lion, a big, big voice for the Democratic Party. He's the guy that kept Joe Biden, resurrected him. But they want to redraw his district. Well, the House in South Carolina voted 87-12. The state Senate, which had a supermajority, didn't give that passage. It had needed a 2/3. They didn't do it. So what happened then, because the state Senate president said he didn't want to do it. Okay, so then the governor, Henry McMaster, has now called a special session. Why is that important? In a special session, you only need a simple majority, not a supermajority. I think this thing gets done and gets through. South Carolina could be one additional seat. You go down to Georgia, they're talking about redrawing the lines, but you got Governor Brian Kemp, no friend of Donald Trump. They're going to do it, but they won't go into effect until 2028. So that, again, is a push. Nothing happening there, nothing to see there. Louisiana, as I've already mentioned, is going to be an additional +1 seat. We've known about that, right? So we potentially have one additional because of the South Carolina redistricting. In Alabama, I predicted this and called this for a long time, right? One additional seat. They're trying to make 2, but I think we're definitely going to get 1. I still think there's going to be an effort in Alabama to redraw a second one. But they've got an August primary deadline coming up that they got to get their act together for. I don't know. We're going to see how this thing plays out. But again, when you go through all of these seats, you start to realize that there's a big pickup. I think we probably net 12 to 13 when all is said and done since the Voting Rights Act ruling came down from SCOTUS. So you talk about what it takes to win the majority. And again, these would be additional pickups. Now we went from 212 to 214. We'd be 4 short of the majority with 12 to 14 toss-up seats. I like our math on that. Anyway, that's why I'm telling you, don't believe the liberal hype. These guys don't know what they're talking about. Anyway, thank you guys for ending your week with us. Go to my new newsletter, SeanSpicer.com. I got a great column out today. I appreciate all the support for Trump 2.0. As Steve Bannon said, let's keep buying that, get it on the bestseller list. Thanks for being with us. We got a great show Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday next week. So hit that subscribe and notification button. Have a good weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.